Hello and welcome to this session. So in this session, we'll talk about a very important concept called as fine tuning. Okay, so what is fine tuning and everything we'll discuss. So in the last few sections of this course, right? So we have learned a lot of things. So we have learned how we can use the LLM models, the large language models through API. So we did an API call, we call the LLM, and we have done a lot of amazing projects. So we have also explored the concept of prompt engineering and like why prompt engineering is very important, right? The right prompts will give you the right results. And we have also talked about RAG so that you will only get the response very specific to your company policies or whatever the documentations that we have done, right? So using these techniques, we build a lot of applications. So you can build the chatbots, you can summarize your documents, you can answer the questions from the PDF. Many real life use cases, real world use cases, we have been able to resolve it. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you an interesting question, right? So if is this prompt engineering enough for every problem? Like every use case can you solve with prompt engineering? Okay, or every use case can you solve with RAG, right? So the answer is no, right? So there are situations where even a well designed prompt and a well designed RAG system cannot consistently produce the behavior of a business expectation. Okay, so this is where your fine tuning comes in. So in this module, we are going to understand what fine tuning is, right? Why it exists in the first place, and how techniques like LoRa and QLoRa. So these are so QLoRa. Okay, so LoRa and QLoRa. So these are the techniques which make it practical to customize our modern language systems. Okay, so now before we basically understand the fine tuning concept, so there is an important thing that we need to understand, which is pre-trained model. Okay, now some of you may already know this. Okay, so let's basically understand this, like for those who have not who do not understand what this concept of pre-trained models is. See, we have called some models, right? We invoke the GPT models, so we invoke the DeepSeek models, right? So these are called as pre-trained models. Okay, so now using these models, right? So basically we basically give a prompt to these models, and then we are able to do a lot of stuff, like you can generate code, right? So these are a lot of different things. You can basically ask a general question, right? You can basically ask it to read and summarize the documents, right? So see, these are all different things, right? So code generation, or asking something about the general question, or doing the summarizations, or you can also what you can also do is like you can basically have some mathematical questions. So a lot of things, right? So these basically like these pre-trained models are able to answer all these questions. Okay, so you don't have to train them additionally. You just basically give them prompts. Based on the prompt, they're giving you the answers. Okay, so now the question is like how. Okay, so how is that they are going to give you the answers? Okay, so let's take an example. So let's say that you have an university student, right? So let's say there's a university student, we have student, we all learn something, right? So it has, now your students, as students you will learn a lot of subjects. So you will learn, let's say, mathematics, physics, maybe computer science, maybe you will learn history. So now somebody asks you a question, right? Says this university a question of physics, this person will be able to answer. Mathematics, it's able to answer. So now how is it? Because these students are able to train themselves on all these subjects. So they learned all these subjects, they trained all these subjects, now they are able to answer the questions. Now if you ask this university student something very specific about let's say me, right? So that person may not be able to know, because that person may never know about me, never read about me, or there's nothing to read, or maybe we never met. So basically that person does not have. So whatever you train on, based on that you give the response. Similarly, right, for all these models, right, so pre-trained models, so there is lot of articles, right? So lot of articles, a lot of research papers, I'm just giving some examples. Lot of code, right? So much is been trained. So millions and billions of this is trained. And now because this has all been trained in this, it is now able to answer all the questions. So that those are basically your pre-trained models. So pre-trained models are models which are trained on variety of data, variety of code and everything, so that it is able to give you a very generic answer, or it is able to give you a answer for variety of questions that you are able to ask. Okay, so we have a lot of pre-trained models sometimes, right? So now the question is like, since you already have the pre-trained model, so what is that we are trying to achieve? Okay, so in this model, so yes, we do have a lot of pre-trained models, and sometimes you may have to customize the models, right? So like for example, so if you want the output in a very specific way, so let's say you ask a question, okay, what is AI? So now in a pre-trained model, based on different models, they might give you related to AI is something, they might give you in a particular format. But what you can also do is you can basically say, "Hey, I always want the answer starting like this. Hey bro, thanks for asking question, and then I want the AI to give the answer." You can do that. So how you can do is you can basically customize your prompt. So you can say, you can basically provide a prompt saying that, hey, you know what, I'm going to ask you a question, you're going to start with this. So that is basically a customization at this level. Okay, so now this will basically work. Okay, so this is okay for smaller things. Okay, now even before this, right? So let's try to understand like why you need customization. So because you also need to understand the business use case, otherwise it will just become learning, and then we do nothing about it, right? So why this customization is there? Okay, why it is required? So imagine that let's say there are different companies. So let's say there is a hospital, right? There is a law firm, maybe an e-commerce company, right? So there are a lot of companies. Now all of this want to build an AI assistant. Okay, so all of this want to build an AI assistant. Now even if they use the exact same base model, let's say there is one model that they want to use, on this they want to basically customize it. Okay, see, now the response that the same model is being utilized in hospital or law firms or commerce, the response that they get should be different, right? So like the hospitals, the response wants to be like careful, medically appropriate response. So the law firm may want it friendly, or maybe they want it in formal language with legal terminology, right? So same model but different use. E-commerce wants friendly, concise customer support. So even though they are using the same model, but and it has a broad knowledge, but it does not automatically know the preferred communication style, right? So you see, the hospitals may have one communication style, law firms have another communication style, e-commerce has another communication style. So it has the answers, but how it communicates back is important. Okay, so that is basically the business application. Okay, so why we actually want to customize a model, why we cannot use it as it is. Okay, so that's a business application. So one of the business applications. Now the question is like, okay, this is cool, but you can actually write a prompt for this, right? Say, hey, you can basically say like, if I am okay, let's say if I want a particular, if I want an application or a AI assistant for let's say customer support, so you can basically write a prompt or something like this, like that, hey, you are a professional customer support agent, you be polite, you always apologize before suggesting a solution, always end your response with thanking you, choosing your company, choosing, thank you for choosing your company, all these things, right? You can do this, you can basically write this as a prompt. Okay, and now if you ask me like, does it work? Yes, it will work. It will work, surprisingly it will work well, like not all cases, but it will work. Now the then what is the problem? We have already written the such prompts previously, right? So what is the problem? What is that we are trying to do here, right? What is that trying to learn from here? Okay, see, the model basically follows the instructions as they are included in the prompt. Okay, so now imagine, right? So you have a chatbot. Okay, so you have a chatbot. Now you have a million users, or a billion users, or fully billion for you. So you have millions of users, you are using your chat bot. Okay, so every time every time a request is sent, right, now it will basically call your prompt, correct? Now your prompt will basically have all these rules, right? So it will have, hey, you need to be polite, you need to be this is all these prompts, right? So that means every time a request, an API, a request is calling, it will actually loading all these prompts. So that means every time your token cost is much more, right? So you may not see this because we are running individually like one program. See, every time you make a call, maybe 300, 400, 500 tokens, but imagine like 1 million users doing it like every day. So same user might do it 10 times, 20 times. So your prompts will become longer, more detailed, and then they basically consume a lot of tokens. Okay, so because every time that you want to, every time that a user uses your chatbot, so you would basically trigger that user prompt, you would basically trigger that system prompt. So for every single message, you are basically invoking a lot of those input tokens. So obviously your token cost will be high. This will again lead to higher costs, right? So this is the problem, right? So as prompts become longer, they may as consume more tokens, increasing cost, and obviously ultimately your latency will also get increased. Okay, so although prompt engineering is very powerful, but it basically relies on repeated instructions every time you call the long model. And then some of the instructions are very long because you will have a lot of rules, right? So obviously your instruction itself are longer. So these things will lead to your slower response, increased cost, and everything. Okay. Now, so for certain use cases, like if you have so many millions of users and everything, so we just see like, okay, although it will work, but then it can go to higher cost and everything. Okay, so that is the limitation, or I wouldn't say limitation, maybe a disadvantages, something whatever you want to call. So for that particular use cases, this is a problem. Okay, now how about RAG? You say, okay, I'm gonna put all of this into a RAG, right? So you have this question. I'll know some of the students may actually ask this question. So the point here is like, so RAG solves a different problems. Like you upload a document and all the answers are from this document. Chatbot, on the other hand, may not actually work like that because it has to cater to a lot of other things. So that is one. And second thing is like, your policies and everything may change, so you keep uploading. So RAG actually solves a different problem than what I basically discussed. Okay, so this is excellent when you are actually calling when you are basically have certain things in your documents, and then you want users to actually get knowledge only from the document. So this will work for, but the problem that we are trying to solve is basically different. Okay, now I'm not saying that you always have to do the fine tuning, because this is again something very important to understand. So whatever projects we did till now, they don't require fine tuning because it's not something we'll have. We don't know what is number of times, because I have done it like one or two times. I run the projects two or three times, so it does not cost me much. But imagine the same thing where I am running million times, and then there are a million or like 10 million times. So that basically means that for 10 million times, like I have 10 million times into all those tokens. So that will basically also scalability is a factor. You need to basically, again, that domain knowledge is important. You need to understand how far, how much are we going to run it, and what will be the cost. Okay, so you need to take the trade-offs. Okay, you need to understand all those details before you actually say like we need to fine tune or not. Okay, so let's look at a simple example or use case that may need fine tuning. So let's say let's consider there is a company called as These Are Technologies. So there's this company, These Are Technologies. Okay, so I'm just giving you a simple use case. So now we want, like suppose we want there are customers who would basically connect to the chatbot of this These Are company. Okay, and every time that we send a response, we want to use a simple language, we also want to use a practical engineering, so we want to include the real world examples, unnecessary things. So because this is basically the company that has technical courses, right? So we teach technical courses. So if you we have an application where you want to interact with this, we want to give the output as in a simple language where we basically focus on the engineering concepts, real world examples and everything. Now, can we describe all of this in a prompt? So the answer is yes, as I mentioned, we can do this, but we would need to repeat those instructions every single time. So now instead of that, right? So let's say if I have like, let's say this prompt may have like 30, 50 lines, and then there is a input prompt, system prompt, output prompt. So it is going to, if I have like 10 million users, it is going to explode the cost, right? So instead, what I could do is like I would basically take a model, and basically what I will do is I will basically say I'll basically train or fine tune a base model. So I'll take a model and I say, hey, now I'm going to train this model and say, hey, you know what? I have certain examples where if this is a question, this might be a question the user asks, and this is the kind of response that you have to give. So I'll basically see, now I'm not telling the model to give the exact answer. What I'm telling the model is understand this questions and response and pick up my style, how I want the user to get the feedback, like how I am teaching, right? So I have a particular style, like I use a lot of things, so I want that particular style to be communicated every time, right? So that that familiarity thing and everything comes into the picture. Okay, so that is a one good use case. So in that way, like what happens is like over time the model would basically learn that pattern and naturally produces the response in the same style. So if I have to train myself, I have to clone myself, so I would basically take a avatar of myself. So you can actually clone your voice also, right? So you would basically say like these are things how I talk, this is a pitch and everything. Over a period of time, then you build a clone and then you can use that clone, right? So similarly what we can do is basically we could basically teach that patterns to that base model, and over a period of time it will basically create the response in our side. So we don't have to keep sending those big prompts, because the model itself, when you ask a question, it will give you the answer in that specific model, so in that specific format that you have. So you don't have to every time keep sending those prompts again and again, because this is already trained. Okay, so that's the motivation behind fine tuning. So initially it will cost us, because there is time that we need to spend to kind of train all of this, but again, you don't have to repeat those instructions, right? You don't have to repeat those instructions, so you will get the token cost down. Obviously that will reduce cost, so you don't need to send the same prompts again and again. So again, not every model we need to fine tune, so we need to weigh in our options. So trade-offs, like, is that really useful? Like one example that I'm giving you, that chatbot, like if you have a lot of users who basically communicate with you, and then that means if you get like per second or per hour, per minute you have like million transactions or a million things that are coming into your chatbot. That means your chatbots are basically sending millions of prompts every time that they send. So those million times they would basically repeat this instruction, so it will cost you. So those kind of areas, if you can just have the base model trained in a way that every time that they basically ask a question or interact with your chatbot, so it will basically give you the answer in a way that you want, or the answers that from what you want to give the answer, right? So that way your duplication, right? So your prompts and everything that you keep sending, you don't have to send it. It will reduce the cost, and obviously it will basically become like a customized model for you. And again, you need to weigh in those options. Okay, so this is the reason, this is a business use case, this is the reason why we need the fine tuning. Okay, So we need to basically understand why we need the fine tuning before we understand what happens, because if you don't have a use case, you cannot go ahead and basically fine tune everything. It will not give you basically things which is like something you just need prompts, you can do prompts, but fine tuning is a very deep concept that you need to do it only when it is absolutely required. Okay, so this is why we need fine tuning. I hope you are clear on like why we need fine tuning and when to use a fine tuning. Again, it's not for every use case, so just weighing in your options and pick up a subject like saying that this is an application that we need to fine tune, and then we can discuss about how we can do the fine tune. All right, so this is what I wanted to talk about in this session. So I hope you are able to basically understand why this fine tuning is needed and what applications is needed. And then we'll talk about what happens in the fine tuning, and that we'll do in our next class.